welcome back, everybody. Thanks, guys, all you three, for
Oh,
joining
there's
me
two
again.
people. Wow.
And then
It's not just us.
I don't know about actually watching. Oh wait, it dropped. Never mind. I don't care. So today, I
They can
guess we're
watch it
just
and replay.
exactly. Well, actually, for this one, I think I'm gonna, because of the audio issues last time, it's not gonna post right away. I will edit
That's
it
fine.
and then repost it just because, yeah, you couldn't hear me,
Done.
even though I mean I wasn't really talking that much last time, but it's fine.
Oh wow, really? You
Yeah,
had the best sound too from in our ears.
Yeah.
yeah, it's just
Yeah, you
I
had the
don't
best
know,
mic.
still
I had to
figuring this stuff out.
upgrade.
I know you sound way better this time, actually, really good.
Ah, yes, because I was
Alright.
actually using the mic from the headphone. Not
Exactly.
good.
All right. So today, I guess we're gonna delve into cultural appropriation a little bit. We won't. I mean, this is a really big topic. We've had many discussions, especially us four, about this in terms of the Igorot culture. But yeah, I think to start it off, do we really need to do introductions again? I don't think so. Why
Nah,
not?
nah.
Maybe.
Okay.
Maybe just a little bit.
Okay. Well,
Okay,
you know what?
yeah, that's
Let's do it again. Let's do a short one. So
Let's do
my
it.
name's Gerald Alatin. I'm part of the Bebop Vancouver group. I'm here in Vancouver, BC, Canada. And my parents are from essentially Mountain Province, Abayo, and Benguet. Jay?
Jay Watan. I'm here in San Francisco. I'm a priest in the Episcopal Church and our U.S. Army chaplain. And my parents come from Mountain Province, and they ended up from the Mountain Province. They ended up in San Gabriel, La Union, and so that's where they immigrated from. Go ahead, Mark.
I'm Mark. Oh yeah, I'm Mark Watan, and we have the same parents, Jay and I. So that's our background. And yes, I'm originally from Bebac, Northern California, and then moved to England. Sorry, so I'm living in London right now, and represent Igorot UK as well. Edel.
I'm Edel Matthias. I live in Vancouver like Gerald. Hey, this is kind of funny because you guys are brothers and we're like neighbors and we've been pretty much like brothers. So that's an interesting mix. My parents
That
are
works.
It's a
from
family thing. Yeah.
yeah, pretty much. My parents are from Benguet. My mom's from Kabayan and my dad's from Bukod. And I'm part of Bebop Vancouver as well, like Gerald.
Nice.
So it's
Oh,
an
yes,
international
and
coalition right now.
Be-back
Yeah.
of Northern California. Yes, got to mention that.
There you go.
Yeah.
All right.
Don't worry, I did.
I know it'd be nice to get. It looks like we're all originally West Coast, at least around here, but it's already hard with the
Yeah,
time
man.
difference
I
with
mean,
London.
trying to get. Yeah, that's true. I mean, like right now it's 12 o'clock, 12 a.m. So. And last time I think we went to almost 1:30 my time.
Yeah.
Or 2 o'clock my time.
Jeez.
Wow.
Yeah, that was almost 2 hours.
That was
the
close.
last stream. Oh,
that's right.
All right. So, yeah, today's topic, cultural appropriation. I think we're gonna start off with. I mean, I guess I could just do a quick Wikipedia definition, just for those who don't know what that is. So, according to Wiki, cultural appropriation at times is also phrased cultural misappropriation, is the adoption of an element or elements of one culture by members of another culture. So, yeah, I just want to start off with how you guys generally feel about appropriation, and it's a good thing, bad thing. Yeah, just general feelings. Edel, you can start.
I think cultural appropriation is kind of a touchy subject, obviously, but more so in the sense that I've kind of discovered, have come to the conclusion that through other conversations from other people who are much smarter than I am, I've come to the conclusion that the actual concept and term of cultural appropriation should just have stayed within academia rather than become um, quite dominant in like normal speech, because it's definitely like a concept that is much deeper than like, hey, you stole my culture. But it's come to that because of common conversations and stuff. That's why like in the States it's a big thing, like cultural appropriation, when certain people that aren't black wear braids and stuff, and that discussion divulges into like the concepts of racism and stuff. Whereas from what I understand in academia and from what I've learned when I was still in school, like cultural appropriation is much more uh like it's much deeper, because it does play into um like dominant culture versus cultures that are obviously minorities, but they're also trying to be incorporated, or they're trying to assimilate them. That's where cultural appropriation becomes like a very touchy thing, because like the dominant culture is effectively stealing from a culture that they're basically like guarding over or whatever. So it like, to me, I think cultural appropriation should be looked at in a lens where it's, you gotta like really look into it more. But in the case of like our culture, when people um like try to look at it in a lens where they don't know much about our culture, that's where it becomes a little bit touchy. But we'll I guess I'm pretty sure we're going to talk about that more, and we've already started talking
Yeah.
about that before we started live. But that's my general thoughts on cultural appropriation. The more we'll talk about it more, the more I'll also chime in on what my other thoughts on it. But that's the basis of it is. To me, I just think that cultural appropriation shouldn't just be thrown around here and there, like on Twitter. I disagree with that. I think it doesn't help the actual discourse on culture when people use it to shut down people's ideas, or shut down a conversation and divulge like basically break down a conversation into something that's really stupid. So those are my thoughts on cultural appropriation, the actual like word of it. But yeah, more on that later.
I like that.
That's
Mark?
really interesting. Yeah, that's really interesting. That's a good, because like all kinds of different words can be transformed and used in certain ways, and
Mhm.
that's why they say words have power. And like when you're pulling a word out of academia, you're correct. I think that it has to be, if you're going to use that word, you have to put it in a proper context.
Yeah.
And you can't just transform it into a weapon just to shut down somebody, to say that you're right.
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
I think that's an important thing to consider. In terms of appropriation, like in our context,
Mhm.
I think that we're heading towards the idea of when people, for us, like when people kind of don't realize that they're borrowing from, even though we're part of we're part of that scape of Filipino culture.
Mhm.
You when you don't recognize that, like you're like for example, like when I see people wearing like a weasing or something like this over here,
Mhm.
and they feel they want to connect because it makes them feel more. Sorry, that's my wife in the back laughing at a sitcom with it. So yeah, trying to be serious here. Anyways, what was I saying? Yeah.
You're the necklace.
We sing.
Oh yeah, so the we sing, like I remember when I was in university, which was like, I don't know how many years ago now, like 20 something years ago, I guess. Anyways, like I'll get sensitive about people wearing this stuff because they would wear it because they want to feel more Filipino, yeah.
Mhm.
And in hindsight, of course, I get it now. But there was a lot of things that come with like being Igorot, like the discrimination that our elders and our ancestors had gone through over the years by our neighboring Filipinos,
Mm-hmm.
because of our history. And so there's a load of other things that come along with that. And so when people who were originally discriminated by, like, for example, like say lowlanders, then their ancestors automatically start wearing your stuff because it's mainstream and cool now,
Mm-hmm.
then it kind of makes you go like,
What? Yeah.
Exactly.
So there are some things like I feel like I don't mind if people want to, it's like wear our shirts or wear something that has an Igorot person on it. Like, my brother-in-law's family, they're from the Masveri family, and people wear the Masveri shirts, and they want to represent their Filipino-ness and show their Filipino pride. But what I do appreciate is when people kind of look a little bit deeper into what that is and what that is for those people that you're wearing on your shirt.
Yeah.
Or when somebody else who's not Igorot wears something that's made from our weave and stuff. It's like, what if they can really have a full appreciation of it, of where it comes from and the history behind that. And so those are the things that like I think that even when we borrow from like if you listen to hip hop, you know what I mean? If you listen to like African American music, you have to recognize that history of music. Even rock and roll, like all that history comes from someplace, and it comes from certain people who've also been discriminated on. And if you can recognize that, appreciate that, and appreciate where that culture's coming from, then I'm not saying it's totally okay just to like start like acting like them or wearing their stuff, but at least you put some thought into that. It's not just I'm wearing it because it's cool now. That kind of thing. That was very intellectual what I just did too. But anyways, that's
yeah. Actually,
that's kind of like where I'm at when I think about cultural appropriation and how I feel about it. I just think that there's nothing wrong with learning and appreciating other people's culture, and then maybe having it influence the way that your lifestyle is or the way that you want to live. Like, but just do your best to learn about it.
True.
Yeah.
Be thoughtful.
Exactly. That's a good point. And I like what you said, Edel, about taking it from the world of academia into mainstream. Like when I was looking up appropriation before this, I read that somewhere, and it's a really good point because, it was in academia before, and then all of a sudden it's on Twitter and everything, and everybody cares about their culture, and not even just their culture, but cool cultures, and it's just like, I don't know.
It becomes sensitive when your stuff becomes mainstream and other people start using it, and it's a whole other thing when they start using your stuff as a costume too.
It's true. It's true, exactly. Like when I actually thought about cultural appropriation, I was wondering, so why does it actually make? Well, so personally, it gets me a little frustrated when I think about it initially. But when you really, I don't know, think about it more, sometimes with appropriation, you get a little bit more exposure, and with some of the things that we're trying to do, like this podcast and in our organizations, we are trying to increase that exposure of the whole world entirely to our traditional ways and all that. So sometimes they say no, what do you say? No, what is it? No press is bad press.
Right. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of like that, but at the same time, it gets frustrating when they are talking about your culture and things are incorrect or mislabeled, or they're teaching about it wrong. And
Yeah.
Yeah, that's when I get frustrated. So yeah, I
I
think
mean, the way I
I,
see appropriation is that it's borrowing without asking, and borrowing without
right,
not giving credit where you get it
exactly.
from. So if if you're wearing weasing or wearing certain weaves that look like indigenous, like Igorot stuff, but you're saying that, oh, this is what this is just me, it's all about me, or you don't give credit to what it is, and then you start embellishing it as your own kind of art, and people do stuff like this. uh
Yeah, yeah,
I think what's hurtful is when you don't cite your sources, when
yeah.
you don't acknowledge the fact that it came from something. Look, we are in a globalized world. Look, COVID-19 is globalized like a virus. Now everyone, it's all over the place, and we can't help it. But we've already been functioning that way for quite some time, no matter where we are, because we have a diaspora, and we've taken ourselves out into the world, and the world has come onto us. We are going to be influenced by the people and the cultures and the places that we are. It's just natural. We are going to take part of what that dominant culture is,
Hmm.
and it's going to be part of who we are. We're going to retain what this indigenous culture is. It's going to be part of who we are. But the people who know us too, just individually and also as a wider group, will come to embellish that as part of who they are, but give credit to where it comes from. And that's simply what I ask. And sometimes that's a hard thing because maybe people are just so used to taking, that they're not used to being able to honor where it comes from.
Yeah.
I don't know
yeah.
what if
It's true.
that's part of the a part of the consciousness. But if you're gonna borrow without asking, well, maybe the whole thing is simply about respect, acknowledgement, and authenticity.
Yeah.
So
I think the most frustrating thing, or the thing that frustrates me personally about like cultural appropriation or whatever, is when I see someone post something about like for example Apawang Ud, and then they'll
Mm.
be like, oh, Filipino, and then all the other Filipinos are like, oh yeah, proud to be Filipino here. It's like, okay, but there's like no
mhm.
recognition of 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 who she actually is or whatever. Or like they'll post about like Igorots or whatever, and they'll be like, oh, it's so cool to be Filipino. That, like, again, what Gerald was saying about how
Mm.
initially there is that frustration where it's like, oh, like what about like what? There's no actual recognition of Filipino.
Yeah.
My point is that like the thing about appropriation or whatever is the lack of recognition, um, and like stuff like that. Because I remember seeing this local, I think, food truck that had a post about their food, and the background was Apawang Ud, and then it was like
Mm.
Filipino food, blah blah blah, and then all in the comments, I wanted to comment. I was like, "Yo, like take this down, man.
It
Y'all are
was
like,
it was
you know exactly what I'm
Yeah,
talking about."
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I know what you're
um,
talking about.
yeah.
It wasn't one food truck.
it was a
Uh,
local.
it was
No, it
an
was a food
event.
truck.
It was an event, right?
Okay, yeah, yeah.
It was an
It
event
was
that
an event.
they were putting
Yeah,
together. So the
yeah.
promoters or the whoever was in charge of putting it together,
Yeah.
yeah, they used
And
a
what if you were
Ud.
her relative and you saw that and be like, that's my Lola. What the heck? I mean, come
Yeah,
on. I
yeah.
mean,
No,
Yeah, I know.
the thing that frustrated me
Yeah,
was like all in the comments there was everything was like, oh, proud to be Filipino, proud to be Filipino, but no mention of Igorotness. And initially, that's what
Yes,
pissed me
exactly.
off. I was like,
mm,
man,
mm, mm.
shut this off. But one thing that someone brought up to me when I was discussing like my feelings about this was like, so do you not see yourself as a Filipino or whatever? And the more I think about it, and the fact that I'm talking about it now, it it my frustration does sound like I'm very, what's the word, uh like I'm trying to push myself away from being Filipino or whatever. So
Mm.
her
Hmm.
question was like, yeah, so do you not see yourself as Filipino? And it kind of took me back, and I was like, oh, good question.
Right, right.
But that
I
is something specific to me because I'm still trying to get into grips of my identity or whatever. Because I told her like
And
Yeah.
I'm still trying to form my identity
uh,
about being an Igorot or whatever. I'm trying to actualize it. Whereas if I were way more mature about this, then I could have a better answer. But for me initially, it was more so the I was more hung up on the anger part, the emotional part. That is very that's something that has to be like addressed for me personally, and for someone who might
Mm-hmm.
have those same feelings, that they should probably like step it back a little bit and think of why that might piss you off or whatever, and not
Yeah.
not just go on to the not just go to the flow and just be like, oh, cultural appropriation bad, but you also got to like think about it and think about why that might make you angry. So
well, I think that one thing that's really fascinating is the embrace of the indigenous, because I think that if you look at how people take in indigenous things, it is looked upon as being quite authentic. I mean, if we looked at this 40,
hmm,
50 years ago, we would have said stuff like, you would have heard all of the wacky stuff like, yeah, that's primitive, that's backwards, and all of that. But now it's looked upon with a certain kind of genuineness that I think is it 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 honors who we are, and yet it's only superficial. I think to me that's where
hmm,
we still haven't we haven't crossed that, we haven't broken that ceiling yet. We
hmm,
haven't
hmm,
gotten into the deeper part. Yeah, people know Apawang Ud because of the tattoos and all of that. But that's still just, in many ways that's just superficial for most people.
hmm.
It's there's something that's beyond that. There's a meaning there that I think that we explore. And I think it ultimately, why would what someone want to do, the put something that she created on you? Yeah, because it has a lot to do with identity contingency. And I think that's generally what we're all kind of like trying to figure out. At least the first phase
Yeah,
of our life.
yeah.
Maybe when we hit the other phase, then we start working on the inner stuff. The stuff in which creates the wholeness of who we are. But for the most part, most of us go on this journey of trying to figure out what our identity is, and the identity contingencies. That which, because
Hmm.
it's different in different contexts. Y'all are up in Canada, so you have this like kind of like Canadian Filipino thing, and then you're Igorot,
Multiculturalism. Yeah.
uh, and so there's a different culture for some of us in America, or wherever you grow up around the world. That's wherever you are planted in right now, that's going to be a deep part of who you are. If I grew up in Oakland, it would be all Oakland. But right now, I'm wearing San Francisco mission, because
What about
that's where I live, right?
what about
So that's
Mark?
what I have. And there you go.
It's
He's in the UK, and he's got like San
Look at the hat.
Francisco on him. Wearing Giants. There's no baseball happening right now, but hey, 3 world championships in 5 years. That's something to be proud of. Now, uh, but wherever you are, you're gonna pick stuff up. It's like Igorot people. We've picked up a certain kind of brand of music. We have a love for country music. At least, like first generation folks have a great deep love for country music,
Mhm.
and that's something that, hey, was that given to us, or did we embrace it and took it as part of our identity because we identify with it, and it's something that kind of like resonates with who we are. What are the values encased with that? And so
Mm.
I think that life is complex already,
Yeah.
and as we've become more
Yeah.
globalized people, we're truly looking at this complexity and taking bits and pieces of what is out there, the great diversity that's out there, and trying to own it in the wholeness of who we are. And how that
Mhm.
gets defined, usually it takes a while. We're always evolving, and that's kind of like the beauty of it. But I think
Hmm.
there's some authentic roots that we have to pay attention to. um and
Yeah.
and so, yeah, when you see that, I'd love for it to get to a deeper level. But sometimes when we get to bent out of shape, when we see
Yeah.
culturally appropriated stuff, it's
Yeah.
like, wait a minute, you know what? Whose hypertension are we fueling? Theirs,
Yeah. Yeah.
certainly not.
Exactly. Yeah.
But
Mm.
yeah, me, yes, my own. And so we have to also be, cultivate that in a way. But
Yeah. No
also
doubt.
be
Sorry.
be vocal about it. when we see that, hey, if there's something wrong, point it out, or we
Mhm.
feel that, hey, that's not being that's not being done correctly, respectfully, then hey, we could point those things out
Mhm. Yeah.
And I think
in ways that people are
the
willing to
whole
listen.
I think like one of the things that you're mentioning is those feelings of anger, and
Mm.
Jay was putting more thought into that, and I completely agree that, like, as long as you're in the search for truth, it's okay to be angry, because they're all kind of stages when you're searching for truth. Like, anger is just the
Mm.
beginning, because usually there's a sense of shock, right? It's just like when the stages of loss, right? Anger is part of that. Well, anger is part of it because anger fuels change. Anger fuels that energy that can change things. The problem is when you're angry and you never get out of that stage. And I know a lot of people who are there, they're full on activists, and they still get so pissed off, which is good, but they just stay in that pissed off mode.
Yeah.
And they don't transform it into the part where there needs to be
Right.
some type of change in the consciousness that you really want to bring to others, right? I mean, what we're doing here, this podcast, is kind of like that transformation of the initial angers that we've had about stuff. And I think it's a great way to kind of like, this is one way you can transform it, is just this kind of discussion, this kind of dialogue. Because when I was talking about the Weesing thing, and this is in the 90s when I was in the university, yeah, I was pissed off, like, of course you get pissed off about a lot of things when you're in that age range, right? Hormones and everything. But like, I was like, man, fuck this shit. You're making this stuff and just selling this at the Filipino festivals. You don't even know nothing about us, man. You can't wear that shit. You know what I'm saying? And I used to get pissed off about it, but then I started to realize, this is like over time when I matured and my understanding of myself matured. I started to realize, well, all I can say is what Jay said, like, address what I feel and then go from there. It's up to them if they want. Hopefully they'll grow a sense of mindfulness, awareness, to want to at least put some understanding or thought in what they're wearing, because even
I
us,
know.
because we were born abroad, we had to do that for ourselves as well, What are
Right.
you
Our own
saying?
culture.
Sorry.
Yeah.
You think about that now. I think, dang, I wish I had like the wherewithal to monetize my own culture that way. Because look at that, they're making money off like my own.
Yeah, people are
culture,
making
man.
money off
Oh my
our
Lord.
stuff, man.
That's
Yeah.
another reason to
It's
get
like,
angry about appropriation, is that monetization piece. It's I don't
and
know.
I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
yeah, Amanda brought it up in the IIC in Hawaii, and one was like people using Wang Ud's picture, and then like
Right.
putting it up in stores. Like, I think was it the Nike store or something like that? Some shoe store had Wang Ud there, and it's like, dude, is Wang Ud even getting paid for that?
Yeah,
It's
I
like,
think with that, I think it was somewhere there in Europe, and I'm pretty sure they didn't know. Nobody there from Kalinga knew that was being used or anything like that. And when we were in IAC, actually, because going around shopping and seeing Mongud's face on like coffee and things that they were selling, I'm like, is there a process of how they do this? Like, can they just use her face, like, because they're in Kalinga, or how does it happen? But apparently, it goes through I don't know, some sort of governance committee or something over there to be approved within Kalinga at least, or probably within the Philippines as well. I'm not really sure about the rest of the world. It's hard to police that.
I mean, they
but
could have popped it off of Getty Images and paid the photographer.
yeah,
So I mean,
exactly.
yeah.
So
Well, hopefully the photographer. Then it's the photographer's responsibility, right? To
well, I think
if
in that place, because all of that, the ownership of the actual image then becomes something. Um, it's almost like fair game. That's a hard one to kind of like really to try to
well, it's funny
get at. But I think that the acknowledgement of where the image comes from and who that person is, I think that's kind of important. Would LeBron James love his
Yeah.
image put on our coffee cups? if he had a tie to Igorotness. I mean, I don't know.
Well, that's a
But
thing. Like in trying to make money off of stock photography, which I've dabbled at, and it's
Mm.
difficult. There's a lot of things that go into that. They say if these things are like recognizable, people are recognizable, the places are recognizable. They don't really approve them, and they don't let them sell those images. So I don't really know how that worked.
And if we're talking about the
Yeah.
ownership of the picture itself, legally, it's within the
It's the
right of the photographer. Yeah. So
Yeah,
it
yeah,
doesn't.
yeah.
Honestly,
their
at the end of the
image.
day, it doesn't really matter. Like if even if
Mm.
Apawang didn't want that picture up on the ad or whatever, because the photographer took the picture, is within his own right. I mean,
Hey,
you
she
can.
might
Maybe it's
actually just
different from
enjoy the
country to
blessing of
country.
that, just having her image out there, and I mean, if it,
Yeah.
who knows what she really thinks about it, but I think that it would be. I know, like my grandmother, if she saw her images all over the place like that,
Oh yeah.
oh man, she would have
Like
loved it.
what the hell? She
She would
from
have
my
loved
family,
it.
like what the
She
hell?
would have laughed. She would have just laughed and just thought it was absolutely
Yeah.
unimaginable that she would be, put on a massive billboard,
Yeah.
That's the
and
thing
put at the
about
Nike store.
But you know what? I think she would have asked for some money.
Yeah, exactly.
Just
True.
like the old ladies and the old men in Ifugao when you come down to Banawi, and it's like, hey, you can take my
Yeah,
picture. Hey,
Right, exactly.
propina.
right?
Get some tip.
I
And
mean,
Good
from the
point.
things I've
Good
heard
point.
about Abawang, she seems to like the attention from
Attention. Yeah. Yeah.
the foreigners and stuff.
Yeah.
So maybe
Yeah.
she did sign
Mm.
off. I don't know. Maybe we don't have the whole
Maybe.
story.
Yeah.
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 But if
We
she
don't know.
didn't, yeah, that's another issue. So
Mm.
it's I don't know. That's interesting. And then
Yeah, it's an interesting topic.
yeah, in terms of appropriation as well, like I remember seeing this article pop up on Facebook a long time ago. I was actually able to track it down finally about our textiles because
Oh.
now you're seeing it more and more. I feel like they're using our patterns and
Yep.
the Inable really and incorporating that into
Yeah.
clothes and modern fashion, which before we get into these, what do you guys think about that and modernizing, I guess, our traditional wear?
My thoughts on that is um it's been quite simple. Like if it's ugly, then no. If it looks good, then I'll support it. Like
That's
that's
subjective, though.
basically it. It is very
Subjective.
subjective. It's definitely
I
subjective to
think
me.
that's pretty. That makes it
But
pretty plain.
yeah, no, because at the end of the day, like that's those are just my feelings, right? But if we were to incorporate like cultural appropriation, then that gets a little messy, and I don't really want to think about that because at the end of the day, the person, he just wants to, or he or she just wants to make a living, right? And that's essentially what our ancestors were doing. Now, for me, if I were to get angry about it and be like, "Hey, man, you're stealing our thing" or whatever, if they were Igorot, then totally support them. If they're Igorot
Yeah.
and they're making ugly fashion, I don't think I support them, to be honest. If it's good, it looks good to me. It's totally cool. But again, going back to basically what we were just talking about and how people are monetizing certain things, it does dabble into the realm of like exploitation. So if I
Oh
were,
God. Yeah.
but the thing is, if I were to get mad at somebody who's not Igorot and he's stealing our textiles or whatever, like it goes into the whole debate of like, is it okay for them to use it even if they're Igorot? So then that comes into like into the debate of like that's kind of like it's in the realm of racism essentially. Just because they're not this race, they're not this ethnicity, it's wrong for them to do that. La la la. You know what I mean? So to me, it's kind of like that's where it becomes like a slippery slope or a sticky issue. So it just boils down to just if it looks nice, then yeah. If it doesn't
Yeah,
look good, then boo.
that was going to be my follow up question since you already brought it up. How you guys felt about it, and does it make a difference if they're Igorot or not Igorot? Mark?
Oh, man.
The Manos.
Okay,
What do you
me.
guys think?
Yeah. There's all kinds of ways I could go with this in terms of the way I think about it, but yeah, I'm in there with if they're Igorot, like, and they're finding a way to like modernize our own stuff.
Mhm.
I'm all for it. If they're not Igorot, and let's say they're just Filipino from another area, and they appreciate the culture and they love the textiles and they love the way they look,
Mhm.
I think that's cool.
Yeah.
But I think either way, if you're Igorot or non-Igorot, that try to find out a little bit more about the textiles themselves. What does it take to make them, for example? Who's making them? These kind of things. And like, what do the symbols mean? What do the colors mean? Right? So those things are important. And I think if you, especially, well, Filipinos in general, try and do the research, because I think in academia they have it's there.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
It's
there.
available now.
And I think there's that. It's going back to that
Mhm.
how what I mentioned earlier about appropriation in general. So like every step, like, whether it be music, whether it be textiles, dancing, like if you're gonna use it, look into it and learn more about it before you do what you do, and then it'll have your clothes will have more soul. It won't just be like, hey, this is a cool design.
Mhm.
I think the indigenous people over there who dance the eagle dance, yeah, okay, that looks cool, and I'm just gonna turn that design into like a jacket and sell it and make money if you know it, I think that most designers these days do, especially I'd say most of the modern designers now do, because they recognize that it's special to us. I haven't seen, not at least not myself, haven't seen too many examples of people just borrowing. Only in the 90s, when they were doing certain things, they were just like, hey, that's Filipino, so that must be like, they just would wear it just because it's Filipino. So okay, yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
And the only reason I had an issue of it back then in the 90s is because people were kind of like talking about us and using aspects from our culture as if our culture was dead and we weren't really alive anymore. We were like,
Yeah.
like it wasn't alive.
Mhm.
And so that part kind of bugged me a little bit. It's like, no, there are still people who still wear these things, like the wanus, the baag,
Mhm.
the G-string. There are still people who wear the tapis, there are still people who speak the language, who still do the rituals, all that stuff. And the culture is very much alive, people. It's not just something that's like, it's dead, so you just borrow and take whatever you want, from it. You have to be a little bit more sensitive about it, and just be thoughtful when using those things. And I think that's fair. Right? It's not getting all overboard about it, like,
Yeah. And being
hey, you're from
ignorant.
my culture,
Yeah.
bam, like that kind of thing. Yeah, it's more than just being angry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, for sure. For sure.
Yeah. Jay?
I think you got to be very tempered with your anger. I mean, because there's a lot of things that are just BS in the world already, and choose what your battles are. Um, I think that if you're passionate about it and you have the energy for it, and you see that something's quite wrong, it's appropriate to be vocal. I think there's a difference though within just yelling, because if you're just gonna yell at a person and just try to shame them, that
Mhm.
doesn't work. That's just
Mhm.
gonna get another person to shut down. You don't have dialogue.
Mhm.
But you do have to find what's some common ground if you want to have a dialogue with someone and said, hey, I'm just curious about where you learned that stuff from, and where did you catch that? There's some patterns there that look very familiar to me. And if they open up with the conversation, this is why I found it. Don't you think people really need to know? I mean, are you just trying to be an artist, rendering your own, interpretation of something? Because it does come from somewhere, and I know where it comes from. And maybe if they have a personal relationship, they know somebody, like, then they might actually consciously think about, like, hey, I got to honor these people. If they know a little bit more of the story, then it might be something that they might find meaningful. But I think that it's up to us to share that. Back in the day when we used to see people, like, doing our Igorot dances, for all of these, like, Filipino cultural nights, and you just see it's all whacked. So I remember, like, before, I just say, oh, just we just stare and not look, and then eventually we started working on teaching some groups, and that still continues today with the Igorot who go to the universities. They do a lot of teaching, whatever they can, and they'll draw on
Yeah.
the resources that they have. And Mark tends to be a big resource for a lot of people, and for these things. But they will, if you have if it's part of who you are and you want to honor it and take the risk of honoring it, knowing that, hey, you might get pushback for some people because they're gonna think. Sometimes people think in a very pan pan Asian, pan Filipino view of things, and that they try to embrace the whole thing, and say that that's part of who they are.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, if you're willing to just say that, then I think it's
Well, especially if
appropriate
you're
then
born
to be
abroad.
willing to study.
If you're second generation born abroad,
Yeah.
you're
Right.
definitely more than likely you're gonna do that. Versus like if you're born in the Philippines, like you're just gonna
Correct.
be
Correct.
mainly about where you're from.
That's true. And
Correct.
it's
And
not necessarily a bad thing too, right?
Yeah,
Because
it is what it is.
because like what Mark was saying, like that pan Asian, pan Filipino identity is really important for people abroad who, especially for people that haven't grown or lived in the Philippines. But that
Yeah.
also doesn't speak to the fact, or it speaks to the fact though that they should also be aware, and I don't want to say like aware or woke or whatever, but recognize the differences in the culture and recognize that they're like, yeah, sure, like, be proud to be a Filipino, be proud that you're in Canada, in the States, because your parents, basically fought tooth and nail to come here, but also like recognize that there are differences because there is history in how certain cultures are seen as other, and yet you're trying to lump them all
Yes.
together. That's almost as ignorant as ignoring the fact that there have been these cultures. So
Yeah, true. Sorry to cut in, Jay.
yeah, sorry, Jay.
No. I mean, because it's a very rich kind of topic, and the nuances that we have with all of
Yeah.
our identities and where we come from, and how, I mean, y- if it's something that is a source of deep pride for us, or sometimes with some folks, there is a there's a cultural shame, and they because they don't have other things that make it look positive for them. So
Mm-hmm.
um
Like,
Yeah. Speaking of that, like, sorry.
yeah, go ahead.
Oh yeah. Speaking of that, I kind of wanted to, well, because there's that other side of the coin too, where you look at something and you look at our clothes, and the question was, what do I think about that? Going back to that question that Gerald was saying, and sometimes I think we have to think of why we like or dislike something.
mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Why would I not like it when it's my own people's
Yeah.
colors and my own people's stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah, so like, for example, like there's a little bit of that feeling sometimes, like when I remember when we were younger, like in the 90s and stuff, like when they saw the full on Igorot, not the chaleco, but the actual full on the modernized sports jacket that was Igorified, right? So it had like all the colors and stuff, yellow, and most people, like the younger kids, would be like, "Oh my God, that's the colors are all loud and mixed and stuff," and it just it it wasn't to their palate, and as I grew older, I started to think about that. Well, why wouldn't I like that? Because when I see like Africans and wearing all their colors, it looks good, and I'm down. That's their thing, you know. That's their thing. I might not be able to wear that, but that's their thing. But when it comes to wearing my own stuff, like wearing a whole full-on jacket like that with all the loud colors and stuff, the yellows, particularly the yellows, the yellow, black, green, red, right, white, like all those mixed colors and stuff. Like when I was younger, I would have thought, "Oh my god, yeah, like that," but in jacket form. But when I was younger, I would have thought, "Man, that's so many colors to be wearing," you know? Yeah. But so part of what I'm saying here is like we gotta also think about like why wouldn't we like that? You know, what's driving our mentality to not like that initially? Because I love it now.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
There is a thing about internalized oppression that I think can run unconscious with folks. All of these things about who you are that then you somehow deny. That's definitely a real thing in the face of other people's privilege. So, but a lot of that's unconscious. That's the stuff that you have to do a lot of really inner work. So that's a really great question that you pose there. You know, if I don't like it, why? You know, what about it?
That's definitely something I can identify with because most of my like adolescent life, and Gerald can attest to this, the fact that like we'd always be forced, like especially when we first came to Canada, my parents would always bring us to Bibak. They bring us to like Baguio Pine, all these like organizations and stuff, just to like for my parents
expose you.
That was kind of like the secondary function of it, but it was for my parents, it was for them to basically try to, it was like a coping mechanism, right? Like they were trying to new country and stuff,
feel that,
right? Exactly, trying to connect with the community here and whatnot. And to me, I've always tried to. I never liked it, to be honest. I never liked going to Reebok.
Yeah, that's fine.
And it's hilarious because now like people can point to the fact that, oh yeah, you're all about this, all about that. Like even to me internally, like I'm thinking like I'm so riled up on all these cultural issues, and even on my social media posts, like most of my personal stuff is always like talking about Igorot stuff. Whereas like talk to me when I was 16 or whatever, I for me my focus at that time was like I want to be cool, right? So to me like going to be back like gong playing and participating, to me that wasn't cool. Whereas nowadays it's like, oh, I want to do this because it's I'm trying to pick up on my culture and stuff. So to me that's like it's just a funny thought to me, because now like I'm here like talking about, oh yeah, cultural appropriation. I don't like it when people do this, but like, man, like before like I wouldn't even care. I wouldn't be aware about this because at that time I didn't care about my parents like opinions and stuff. And like now that I'm like trying to be all active with Bebop and trying to be active with my culture, my parents are just doing their own thing. Like they're really happy that they're happy that like they're happy to share with my aunties back home. They're like, well, yeah, Ido's doing this with his friends and stuff. But at the end of the day, it's like, oh, whatever. He's living his life or whatever,
I can totally relate. I totally relate to that when I was younger.
I find it for me that I'm more like gung ho about like, oh yeah, weaving or gangsa, even though my dad's the one who knows how to play the gangsa, but like he's at the end of the day he doesn't care. Right?
Well, it's funny because I felt exactly the same way when I was younger, but then once I started to actually do the performances and dances and stuff, that's when I really started to get that connection with the community and with the culture. I mean, I still tried to ignore it, but just I don't know, I couldn't ignore it for that much longer, I guess. So
I guess
no, you can't ignore the call of your ancestors, man. There's no that's my personal belief. It's like the ancestors will keep on calling, and until you finally listen.
I can definitely agree with that, man. For sure.
Yeah, it's pretty
Yeah.
interesting. And so, just to go back to the original article that actually got me thinking about that question, original question. So this article was done by, what is this, Metro Style Fashion.
Hold on. Is Jay? Are you there still?
You remember that? Do you guys know this?
Metro.
Hold on, I'm just trying to see if Jay's still there because he was frozen.
Oh, he is
At least
frozen.
from my camera.
Frozen for a while.
Jay,
Oh,
So
there he is.
yeah, I'm back.
Yeah,
did you hear the audio at least?
No, it just pixelated. That's what it sounded like.
Oh.
I'm like, uh-oh.
What's the article, Jay?
Okay.
Metro.
So yeah, we're just going back to the original article that started this question. That got me thinking about this question was, it was an article from Metro Style by Hershey Neri. It's called "How to Wear Philippine Indigenous Textiles Responsibly,"
Right.
according to a textile expert. So in this article, there's a few questions that I guess is a good start for people who want to, I don't know, start using Igorot textiles in their work. But I was interested in seeing what you guys thought about these questions. So first, did did the indigenous group give their consent to use the textile? I don't know. This is a little difficult. Like, how would they?
Yeah.
How would they get consent as a whole?
And who do you ask, right? Who do you
Yeah, and
ask?
it's a good thought.
True.
But yeah, I don't really know where they would get that kind of consent. I don't know.
For me,
Yeah.
most of the like articles like these to me are just these like woke, like left wing kind of like.
Actually, this is honestly one of the better articles that I've read. To be honest.
No, true. No, that's true. That's true. But
yeah,
it is in that line of like BuzzFeed, like how to be responsible.
I know what you mean. It's true.
Yeah, right.
So,
right. But
first question was, did the indigenous group give their consent to use the textile? Next question, was the community consulted? Kind of along the same lines. Another question, are the communities compensated fairly? That's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Another question, is it's okay for foreigners to wear our indigenous textile? And is it okay to mix textiles from different communities together in one piece? How
in one piece? What does that mean?
Yeah,
like
maybe like.
Oh, you mean mixing?
Like someone's wearing
so
a
probably
parenga
like
weave
with buntok or abra.
Yeah, or even something southern, like a southern style weave, and then mixed with. Yeah, I think that's what they're kind of like.
In the northern style, yeah.
And then, how can I know if the brand or designer I'm buying from is ethical? Ooh, that's a good one. Yeah, so those are just some of the questions that they pose in this article, and I don't know. I think
that's fair.
They're decent questions to think about and ask for designers, especially when talking about textiles. But yeah, some of them it's like, yeah, how are you going to get a complete consensus? Isn't it? It's impossible.
For sure.
I think it just depends on how big the community is. You know. How big that community is, because this isn't like we're thinking from our context, but like if you're like from a really small local village and you had like a, you know, like you had only like you have a specific design that nobody else around you has, you know, that kind of thing. And that's where that context would work, you know.
True.
Yeah, true. It's always going to be, I think, the nature of the relationship. And if a person, if the designers, the artists, the people who are putting together the textile, you know, wants to acknowledge it, it's going to depend on the nature of that relationship. Some people just see something that they saw and they were inspired by it, and then they roll with their version of it. I don't know if you could really truly help that, other than the fact that, you know, you just want to ask that person, hey, where'd you get that from? You know, but for the most part, I think that's what people do. They see something that looks, that looks quite pleasing, and they're gonna try to replicate it. If it has a sense of beauty in it, they're gonna replicate it. And why not? I
Yeah.
mean, we do stuff like that in terms of like our architecture. We do that stuff in terms of our build design. When we remodel our house, we look at the person who has like this the something that like really nice. I remember the cops. I had police officers visit my house one day, and uh they
The
were
gongs are too
investigating a
loud.
certain they were investigating a certain
God,
case, and then a
we've
bunch of
had
them were
that.
in here and in the house, and they were like, "Hey, I like how your kitchen looks." And they just started taking pictures of the kitchen because they liked how it looks. And one guy was actually doing a remodel, and because the house, the kitchen looks modern as opposed to the rest of the house, which looks like it was built in the 1980s. And so then they just started taking pictures of it, and I was like, "Oh, okay." So then I think that sometimes you're looking at something that looks pleasing and beautiful, and you want to kind of like mimic that. You want to kind of
Mhm.
like almost own it, and and yeah, I get where there should be an acknowledgement of where it comes from, but if it gets mainstream enough, it's going to be embedded within the culture
Mhm.
in ways that we really don't know, and it'll come to a point where you don't quite know where it came from. If it really gets that big, you kind of don't know where it comes from. You just kind of like know it was from that area, that direction. Oh yeah, it was somewhere in the Philippines. It might have been from
Mm.
the northern part of the Philippines, in the mountain
Yeah.
areas, but you
But
might
that
not
takes
know
so much
exactly
time,
what.
right?
Yeah,
What's
yeah.
that?
That takes time for it to actually get to that point where it becomes like a cultural, like it becomes embedded in the culture or the wider mainstream culture. It takes a long time, and at that point, like the original piece becomes bastardized into this, like again, to this like pan Filipino like identity. So I think that's
Mm.
basically what you're trying to get at, right?
In part, yeah, I think that ultimately, uh, I I would say that with if we're using textile that looks kind of indigenous, you just you gotta say where that stuff comes from. And I get it. They're like some artists. Like remember when when Black Panther came out and
Oh yeah, I was gonna
the
mention
the
that too.
You guys are just stealing
right.
my follow up questions.
Oh, sorry.
We're
And the
flowing into
designer
that.
Since you
the
are going to bring that
Wakandan
up anyway,
weave.
let me just say, yeah, because there are reports that some of those patterns were inspired by some of the Igorot patterns that they used
Yeah,
in
I
Black
think you
Panther.
forgot patterns, right? Yeah.
I think so. Yeah, I was just going to ask you guys how you guys felt
Interesting.
about that, and after we were all talking about this.
I felt
When
quite proud,
that,
Yeah.
yeah. It's one of those things where that's all right. And he did mention it too. He didn't try to hide it and just say these are Filipino things.
Well,
He the guy who
yeah, it's funny
was
though
it?
when you look at reports about the costumes, they don't all mention that. I know he did in I think maybe handful of interviews or whatever it was, but I saw it in a few articles. Him mentioning that they were Filipino cultural inspired, Igorot inspired actually.
Yeah,
But
especially the beetle nut red.
yeah, but a lot of other articles just mentioned that all the costumes were African inspired, which I mean it's true. They were taken from a lot of African tribes, right? When you look
Yeah.
at all the different
Yeah.
those tribes in Wakanda, but the patterns themselves, yeah, not all the articles surprisingly mentioned that.
Yeah, only the
That
articles that actually had the actual designer
Yeah.
there.
I'm looking at
He's
it
the one
now.
that said it.
Yeah.
True.
He's the one that said
Hey,
it. But like when it was just like kind of a broad article, they didn't really mention it. I know what you mean because I was, and I'm sure it was a mix of different things, you know. But
yeah.
I'm glad that he threw that in there. You know, it's pretty cool. At least it was enough for me to put it on my Facebook page and share it.
Mm-hmm.
and remember
So
this guy right there, he went to Ifugao after he killed half of the universe, right?
Yeah.
that's right.
Yeah.
And then he chilled
Yeah,
in the
there you
rice
go.
terraces, man.
And just
That
That's
chilled there.
right.
Yeah.
He
that
got his own rice
6 second
terrace, Come
that
on.
6 second
That's where
clip.
Thanos wanted to go.
For those who don't know,
They definitely
and
didn't
who
hide that.
haven't, yeah. For those who don't know, Thanos from the Avengers movie ended up going to Banawi rice terraces to relax and chill.
Spoilers,
that was
guys.
his.
Spoilers.
Yeah, spoilers. Sorry about that. Yeah. It's been how many years now, right? It's been a couple of years since that came out.
Yeah,
I think.
couple. Yeah,
But that was his planet. You know, he went to the mountains and decided to chill. That's where he had his farm.
That's where you go to relax and just farm.
Yeah, because he wanted to be a farmer after he, did the snap.
Stare at the sunset.
That's true. That's true.
That's right.
At a grateful universe.
So before this, we were actually talking about transitioning from what we felt, or before we started the podcast, we were talking about transitioning about what we felt on cultural appropriation to something like Igorot's adopting different cultures, like country music or country in general.
Cowboy.
So the flip side of the coin.
Exactly. Right. So I don't think we really felt that it was a form of appropriation, but I just want to open this up to you guys.
Well, country music is a real big thing, especially in the mountains, and partly because the music was brought in by the early colonizers. So so like I think that what we were mentioning before was that the reason that a lot of folks like country music is because of its expressiveness and its ability to tell story. So basically, that's something that our folks had and we're doing already. They just transferred the type of music and the storytelling into country music. So whether they know it or not, that's what they did. But because country music was the kind of like that, I guess that was that thing that next form or next evolution of music for the older generation at that time, and of course it's passed down to the following generations, and even to this day, a lot of the young folks, they just love country music out there, and it's a great expressive music, and I think that's one of the biggest reasons why it exists over there. And it's really interesting because like when I was younger, going back to that kind of idea, what we were talking about, what I mentioned earlier is like, why don't I like this? Well, when I was younger, I didn't really like country music. And as I got older, and I may have mentioned this in the last podcast or maybe after the podcast, but look, when I got older, I learned to appreciate the music because it was all around me. But when I thought about why I didn't like it, it was because everybody around me was saying they didn't like it. I mean, I'm talking about non-Igorots because everything was about hip hop. Everything was about, especially at that age, hip hop, rock music, heavy metal, everything but like country. What we always related country to was people just drinking and singing sad songs about like how someone got shot to death or something like that. Yeah, or they broke up or something. Some really dreary bluesy kind of music. And so it's like it wasn't my thing back then. But then even country music has evolved. But being exposed to so much of it and listening to a lot of the lyrics and the storytelling and the way it's delivered it's a very honest and a very honest music and very expressive, where you don't have to like kill too much when you sing on the runs and stuff. You just kind of like express it out. It's almost like you're talking, especially the old country. It's almost like they're talking,
Yeah. Right.
And then there's that whole thing with the guitar.
You think about identity, and what is the identity when you think of like the association of being in the country, being the backwater, being the bundok. Well, I mean, yeah. I mean that the elements of that music speak to a lot of our folks. That element of ruggedness, of self-reliance, of being tough, being strong, and of loyalty, of love. And these are all things that are embellished within the story. Because I mean, traditionally in our cultures, we have chants that speak of stories, and it goes back a long ago. Well, and very much in country music, it speaks of stories and storylines. I mean, what's our national anthem? Which it's probably Country Roads, right? And you think about like what that means when we play it. We play it at almost every BVAC function when you have like some sort of string instrument, you know, and it speaks of like almost heaven. And whether you switch out West Virginia for Baguio City,
Mhm.
uh, these elements of being out there. Life is older than the trees, younger than the mountains, blowing like a breeze. Right? I mean,
Right.
those things really remind us of who we are. That those elements, and so that I think that's a gift of music. Even though this is like Western brand music, and it comes from like what John Denver. uh, it has come to mean so much for those who are now, especially those of us who live abroad. So when it's sung, it's almost like a sing along for us, because it feels like that anthem, that the Igorot Nation anthem. And I know that other cultures definitely have taken that song to other ethnic groups have taken this song too as their thing. But
Mhm.
definitely how country music has spoken to our people really is a matter of how we've seen our identity in the world. And because my parents used to play like country music when we were on the cassette decks, the 8 tracks and all of that, when we were taking these road trips. So we'd listen to like Merle Haggard and Johnny Cash and Anne Murray and Dolly
Along with some
Parton.
disco,
Yeah, disco too, but it would be country or
Wind and
disco.
Fire.
Yeah, yeah.
Kenny Rogers,
But
rest in peace.
oh,
Yeah,
Kenny
Kenny Rogers.
Rogers. There
Yeah,
you go.
Mhm.
Dolly
There
Parton.
you go.
Dolly Parton.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah,
yeah.
definitely Kenny Rogers. God, thinking about
Yeah.
Kenny Rogers chicken right now. But to just add on to that, you know what I find really interesting though, because going along with like, geez, like when I was younger, how I didn't appreciate the music, but now that I'm older, I do. Well, like I play guitar and I like to learn different styles. Just this kind of goes into that whole thing of looking at different culture, different styles of music and stuff. And you know, going to Hawaii, I've been to Hawaii like 4 times. What I always love is the slack key music, the slack key guitar, and how like peaceful it sounds.
Yeah.
And well, I found out, when before I studied, I thought that was just, they just had that music, and I would think about it, it's like, why did I not like country, but I like this music? Essentially, it's country music, you know. Saki guitar is like that country folk kind of feel,
Mhm.
but I like the Hawaiian music. Yet I had this weird feeling towards the country music that my people were singing. And what I even learned even more was that they had borrowed. I think they were influenced by either Portuguese or Spanish cowboys that moved to Hawaii to train people how to farm. They left their guitars there. Yeah, they left their guitars there, and the natives kind of like picked up the guitars and started playing it and tuning it their own ways, and they just were really creative, trying to replicate the sounds that they had heard before from the other cowboys who were teaching them, the Spanish or Portuguese cowboys who were teaching them how to farm. And that vocalization that they do, where they do a lot of, they do a lot of like using, they call it head voice, or like that kind of nasally kind of singing that they do. Well, that was influenced by yodelers. They had people who were from that area come over also to teach them different things, not music, but they were yodelers. And so the natives over there, they adopted that sound into their music. And then when you listen to Hawaiian music now, that's what it is. It's that combination. And I could appreciate that history. And I started to realize, like, man, like as I grew older, I started to learn to appreciate why Igorots, our people, are integrating different things also into what's happening. And I don't know, is it cultural appropriation?
Speaking on cultural
Well,
appropriation, like
it, it, mhm.
it has you have to say something about how it, like I used to think it was cultural appropriation. Like I used to argue with somebody, but like the fact that we're wearing Western clothing even though we're of Igorot descent, like that's technically
Yeah.
cultural appropriation. But in a way it kind of is, right? But because the argument was that because they were a dominant culture, and if they're stealing from a culture that is being oppressed, then that's what the cultural appropriation is. And to me, I don't quite think it's to that extent that we're stealing from we're not initially stealing from like the white culture with the country music. I think that it's like because with the Americans coming to the Philippines, they were trying to assimilate uh, Igorots, right? That was their
Right.
main point. So in order for us to fit in, we had to assimilate. So we didn't appropriate in that sense of like dominance or
What you're
whatever.
saying is that there
Mainstream
was a
culture.
power element within that kind of
Yeah,
like
yeah,
that
because with
that
a
had
cultural
influence.
appropriation, yeah. Because with cultural appropriation, what it is like the power dynamics between the people who are in power versus the people that are being oppressed, right? The
Hmm.
woke stuff. But when I express to people what like where I'm from is like what what where Igorots come from, the best way I can express it is like think of the Appalachian Mountains, and
Mm.
where country music came from was from the eastern Appalachians. Like I'm looking at freaking Google. Like the origins of country music can be found in recordings of Southern Appalachian fiddle, blah blah blah. So like in terms of not only assimilation, but what Igorots have done is they've adopted and they've incorporated in order to like connect to the to the to the wider culture, but connect it in a way that's been familiar. So like with
Yes.
country music, I remember even in the IIC in Hawaii, auntie was talking. One of the aunties were talking about how the country music and like specifically country roads is very similar to like I think like a certain specific Igorot style of music, but she just basically said it was like it's very like how I think it was the Kalinga song, the what's it called? Salidumai. It sounds like Salidumai in the way it's like being sung or whatever. But
Mm.
yeah, again, basically like the reason for me the reason why country music is such a big thing is like if you think back at like the history of country music, it came from the Appalachian Mountains, which is very similar to where we're coming from, where we're like Igor's come from, the mountains. Like that
Right,
they're
right.
basic similarities and whatnot, and also
Yeah,
the
that
music
I
style too. It's very similar.
if we didn't
Yeah.
feel the association and hear the music as being
We wouldn't have
beautiful,
adopted it. Yeah,
we wouldn't have adopted it. I think
exactly.
so. We would have
Yeah.
adopted some other thing. We would have went with the Chinese tonality and and done something totally different. If
Hmm.
we felt that that sounded right to our ears. My uncle always had a saying: "It has to sound beautiful to the ears," and and if it does, then that's what that that's the correct alignment.
Mm.
And I think that if it didn't sound right to our ears, I don't think we would have adopted it.
No,
It would have
exactly,
been something
exactly.
that okay, we'll just see that that's
Yeah.
nice. Thank you, America.
Yeah,
We will
it would have been
do another
forced
good
But
one.
onto us, right? It
Yeah,
would have been
yep.
forced onto us as opposed to like Igor's adopting it. I mean, it could have been forced, right? But the fact that it's become so synonymous and the fact that we've come to like again adopt it, like it's yeah. I don't yeah, it's
Some people can even bring up, when it comes to colonization, um, that people in general have to create some type of coping mechanism.
hmm hmm
So one is to just all out resist, but then one of the other aspects is to adopt the mainstream culture. So if that if it's a white American comes there and has all the power, and you feel that power dynamic, you kind of want to absorb a little bit of that. And he plays this really cool instrument that I've never seen before. It's like this guitar with strings, and he has these great tunes, and I can learn English through the songs. Why not? Right? So there's like
There's a function.
all this other there's functions. There's like layers of stuff. I think that happened from our elders who adopted the music, and it's not far. Filipinos in general, all across the board, just adopt. I mean, we always we're good at taking and kind of like turning it into our own brand a little bit, right? Because and I mean, like, you think of the gangsa. Some of the stories that the old folks tell me is that a lot of them, especially if they couldn't afford the gangsa, they didn't have it. So even before they had gangsa in their area, they just clap, or they slap the body, or they use the bamboo instrument. They use another form before everybody started using the gangsa, because back before only the certain people could have the gangsa, like certain class who could afford it. And so you think about it, before they got those ideas of playing the gongs, they had to get it from the Chinese, who were the Chinese traders who were coming up and down and either integrating or trading with them. And I think they our ancestors were able to kind of like, hey, that sounds pretty cool, and not to mention I think just all across the islands there was some form of gong playing.
Yeah.
Anyways,
Yeah.
Some form of gong playing. So
it
was easy to kind of want to adopt that, see it and adopt it. But the Igorots just did it a little bit differently over time.
Well, it became part of our identity and who we already see ourselves as. And if you look at all of those elements, it's just appropriate. Just like how Igorots love blue jeans too. I mean, you go there and cowboy hats, and oh man, we love that stuff. It's part of who we are. Even the way we walk out there, there's a certain gait that a lot of our people walk.
The swagger,
cowboy swagger, right? You notice that?
I know.
Like people walk like they just.
I thought their hips were just bad.
Yeah, that could be something else too. That could be the malnutrition out there and the lack of vitamin D. But I mean, but there's a certain gait that folks up there walk with too, and I was like, ooh, yeah, for sure.
The funny thing, and sometimes I mention this to folks, is that as much as we've adopted, like country music, people like to associate themselves with the cowboy, especially the cowboys like that they see in TV. And so they may have watched like cowboys versus Indian movies, right? Indian, Native American movies.
Mm-hmm.
And I tell them, it's funny, we're dressing like the cowboys, but we're really
the Indians.
In the movies, we're the Indians, we're the Native Americans.
Yeah.
So I always think there's an irony to that.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
That definitely plays a part into the whole adopting aspect of the cowboy thing, because like in Western media, like the cowboys were always the good ones. They always beat the Indians, right? And that's what is prominent in the cultural zeitgeist. So I tend to think that like for Igorots, us adopting the cowboy is synonymous to like saying like, no, we're not the savages, we're the cowboys. You know what I mean? Because we weren't, we weren't beaten.
Right.
We weren't beaten. We weren't pushed out of our land like some people have been. Like the history of Native Americans, First Nations, like is such a sad thing, right? And like and for us, like for
it's also a great story of survival too when you think about that.
Hell yeah.
And I think that there's definitely an association with that, because our ancestors were pretty, I mean, you would say that they were pretty savvy when they realized that, when the Americans first came into Philippines and they're having it out with the Filipino revolutionaries from the turn of that last century. They saw how many people they were killing, and they
Yeah.
didn't want anything. They adapted pretty well when the Americans made it up to the mountains. They figured out that we're gonna have to work with these people because if we resist them, it could lead to a
Yeah,
lot of loss of life.
there was genocide happening
And
in the lowlands already. So
right, right. And
Hmm.
so
yeah,
I mean that Philippine American War, which is sometimes called an insurrection, lasted for over 8 years. It was, and it led to the countless deaths of so many Filipinos. We don't even know the number. We just see the images of people in the burial spots. I mean, but we
yeah, they
don't
say about a
know
third of the
truly.
population. So
Is that
Yeah,
right?
yeah. So they died of war,
yeah,
of famine, of disease, of all the stuff that comes with that kind of fighting. And the Americans were fresh off of the Indian Wars,
Yep,
so they
that's right.
brought all of that technique, and then
The
they bring
tactics, yeah.
all of this. They bring the tactic of education system, and then they bring in
Hmm.
this narrative that says that, hey, the Spanish were the real bad guys, but you will be our little brown brothers, right? And
yeah, yeah.
then we start getting displayed all over the place in these nice World's Fairs. And right. Oh, hey, that's last week's topic. But
Yeah, watch last week's topic if you don't know.
but that's part of the legacy.
Hmm.
And so the country music, the stuff that we've adopted, our ancestors adopted, and subsequently that we've taken on, is part of that. It's important, I think, to know where it comes from, and also to claim it as our own. Some of these things,
Yeah,
and if we
that's
claim it
why I
as our
mentioned the
own,
whole thing about the Hawaiian folks. I
yeah,
mentioned
then
the
it
thing
becomes a
about the Hawaiian
tool.
folks because
Because it's
Right, then
evolution,
it
eh?
becomes a
sorry.
tool of your of your own empowerment,
Exactly,
Yeah,
exactly.
and the acknowledgement that you have embraced something that you have borrowed it. I mean, I think that we like, again, like, appropriation is like, cultural plagiarism, right? You have to kind of like know where it comes from.
and there's
And
power dynamics
Mhm.
there, right?
there is power, but then you becomes your power too. uh
Exactly.
and you can see how, like, if you go up to like places like Baguio, where the music scene is quite robust.
It's awesome.
uh, uh,
It's awesome there.
right.
Yeah.
It's like mini Nashville in the Philippines, right? You go into the cafes, you go into the little theater areas, the studios up there, and you'll see
Hmm.
people like, just being quite amazing artists out there. And hey, that's just a part of who we are, I think. And so we've taken something that was been given to us, that we had an opportunity because it sounded beautiful. We took it, and now it has become in many ways our own.
Yeah.
And I think that
And if you're a young
that's part of
Igorot,
the legacy.
and if you're a young Igorot, don't knock it till you try it.
Beetle
Try
nuts.
it a
Right,
lot, though.
right. In fact, if you could listen to a diversity of music, it'll just make you a whole person. I think, yeah, a
Yes.
diversity of
Yeah,
genre.
definitely.
If you could appreciate those things, I think that there's definitely, there it expands your being. It really does.
Mm.
Well, it's funny because I
That's
can definitely appreciate what's it called, country music and the whole cowboy stuff, but that isn't really me. Like country
Yeah, totally.
isn't exactly my thing.
yeah. No, that's true.
So like I know some, but I'm not out there looking for a cowboy hat or boots or anything. So my dad, on
Yeah,
the other
that's
hand,
Yeah.
when I was living in Calgary,
Right,
definitely
right.
had to get some boots and a cowboy hat out there for him. So
yeah.
I think I went for
The
myself.
first thing my father-in-law, when he first visited San Francisco, the first thing he said to us is one of his goals was to find a good cowboy hat. And so we went to Berkeley, and there was actually a cowboy hat store in Berkeley, and we went all the way over there. And that was one of the first
Wow.
things we got,
Amazing.
And one of the things is he got a couple cowboy hats for some of the elders who were going to do the rituals at our wedding. So that was part of the reason he got it. But he
Oh,
also got one for himself. He still wears that. He still wears it, man, to this day.
Well, that's the thing about good quality boots and hats. Like, they should last a long time. Like,
that's how it should be. Yeah.
We don't put them through their paces like they used to be. So, yeah, it's a decent investment. I just never thought to get one for myself. I'm okay without it.
I know it's not. That's fine. That's fine. It is what it is. I mean, you can still appreciate something and not have to be totally like immersed in it. Yeah.
Right.
But compared to some of the kids that are from Philippines or who grew up in Philippines and came here, I mean, I can see that they definitely love it. So
yes.
Yeah, it's definitely part of our culture for sure.
No doubt. No doubt.
Can't get away from that. I do want to ask, sorry, I have to derail this, but I forgot to ask this earlier. This is something that's been bugging me for a while, because there are other, I think Jay brought this up-ish earlier about you, Mark, teaching other groups about how to perform our dances and stuff like that. Were you doing that for other groups? So there are some groups that are local here, and we know that they are they perform some of our dances, right? And I'm just not sure how to approach it, and these are professional dance groups that go out and monetize their dances, right? They perform. So it's just a matter of, should we reach out, as Igorots, and try to teach them our proper ways, proper dances, everything, for them to use them in their performances and monetize that? Or should we reach out and be like, hey, it's not that cool?
Cancel them. Cancel them.
Exactly, right? That's a thing right now. So
I think a little bit of both, man. A little bit of both, personally. Because in my experience, the people who I taught were people who asked me. So, you know, and then the other reason I did it was because I was in the PCN. It was way back in 1998 or 99. And I was sick and tired of like watching the BS version of just horrible versions of our dances on there. So I decided to just take it upon myself to teach people like how to do it more authentically and how we do it. And it was still, even that was quite hard. I mean, like we mentioned last week, the dances are technically look simple and might be simple for some, but when you do it and you have so many things to coordinate, not easy, especially when you want to get a good sound. So it was a real challenge for me to try and create something like that. But then at the end, what I appreciated was that they appreciated that gift of learning more authentically and learning something that wasn't necessarily choreographed. It was more about feeling, right? Because when you're doing the dances, you're not counting steps. You're doing the dances in a way where you're feeling, again, time and space between your partners. And you're at the same time as your movement, you're also trying to play the gong appropriately so that it will rhyme in a certain way with your neighbor in front, your neighbor in back, and all the other guys playing. And at the end of it, some of those people had danced in different dance troupes, and there was a great appreciation because they had never learned how that's how our dances were. They only knew them as choreographed pieces, you know. So, and that's usually what I get from other groups that we've taught, and I have appreciated the groups that have come out to us and asked us to kind of share with them. But I think that if you're a group that's just trying to represent a certain ethnic group in the Philippines, and you haven't reached out to that ethnic group and tried to learn their stuff and learn how they play it, there's something to be questioned there, especially if they're going to represent themselves as authentic people, authentic Igorots, and they're not. You know what I mean?
See,
That's why I was saying. Yeah, sorry.
That's the thing. Exactly. There's two. I think I've seen two different ways of doing it. I mean, there's groups that, yes, may be incorrectly saying that they are Igorot or whatever, and performing these dances with that notion. But there are other groups that are just doing like Filipino dances in general. But the thing is, it's not as authentic when they do Igorot dances, and it should really be corrected. And
The
right now, at least,
part?
that's what I'm talking about. But the other part, oh my god. Anyway,
another topic. Yeah, the frustrating part.
Don't you
about
think
the
that
fact
there's some?
that-
Well, go on.
No,
I
go
mean,
ahead.
Don't you think that there's some groups who literally think that Igorot people don't exist over here, or we look we have, or that Igorot people
we're just
are
legend,
so endangered that we are just a stuff of legend. So they have to kind of like. I mean, there are some groups I've heard that function that way. Like we are like the stuff of legend, literally, and that we're not even over here, which is just kind of.
That we just do. Whoever is Igorot only plays country music.
Yeah, yeah, and the idea of the Igorot is long gone because we're in modern times. That's another like
right.
That's another like what
myth.
Yeah. The frustrating part about what Juris is talking about is like I know somebody in that troop, and
so do I.
we're oh right, that's right.
And it's
no, the thing is,
and it's
we're her and I were close friends.
Yeah, I just don't know how. I mean,
she on the podcast? She watching?
I'll share this with her.
Highly doubt it, but no, it's just it's hard to I don't know, really think about how to really approach them and how to mitigate this. And I mean, we should really promote that learning aspect of our culture, and but at the same time, you don't want to be canceling as well. But I think the part that bugs me the most is that monetization, where it should really. It's kind of selfish saying this, but it should be at least the Igorot organization that's monetizing, if anybody that's monetizing these things. But
it should be a source of exchange and learning. I think. I think that there's opportunity for that kind of dialogue if people know. It's if people really do believe that we're the stuff of legend, then I think that seems kind of backwards in kind of thinking. Because I mean, how could we have just disappeared as an ethnicity? But I think
people don't think we exist anymore.
I honestly think that people do believe that, and so they're trying to recreate it in a way that for them that it sounds like it's honoring, in yet. And to be honest with you, I mean, Igorots around the world, people, unless they've showed up at like our function and know us personally, they wouldn't know. They would just think that we're Filipinos, and so unless the conversation comes up or they see us walking around with our ethnic clothes, they wouldn't know at all. We blend.
You mean non-Filipinos, or you mean non-Filipinos, or
like Filipino people? They wouldn't know unless we told them.
Yeah, they just
and then they get surprised. I thought you people are super brown and had tails. I'm like,
I've gotten this a lot. Like, you don't look like an Igorot. What?
Yeah.
If you're gonna go,
it always comes back to that, doesn't it? It always comes back to that.
It's funny because when I was looking up appropriation stuff, when I was googling appropriation in terms of Igorot, there was one article actually that came up that talked about our IAC in Hawaii, which was, I think, pretty interesting. One thing I do want to point out in this one is when they mentioned Bebuk, they said Benguet, Ifugao, Buntok, Apayao, and Kalinga. So this goes back to our first conversation, Mark, about what Bebuk stands for. And I'm pretty sure that A used to stand for Abra. Anyway, I just thought that was interesting.
Probably was.
I just thought that was interesting.
You're right.
Abra just doesn't get any love, it seems like. They always get forgotten. Anyway, in this under this article,
okay. Oh yeah, go ahead.
In the comments in this article, there is one. I mean, it's in Tagalog, and I think I understand what it's saying. But there's one comment saying, maybe these aren't even true Igorots. From what I understand, they wear bahags and red costumes, something like that. And I don't know. I thought
that goes
funny.
along with that whole thing where a lot of people don't realize that just because we're not wearing those things that they don't realize that we still exist, you know?
Yeah, it's funny, but
that connection between that term Igorot and what they know Igorot is that whatever they have in their head. Oh, that person with their wanos, their G-string, and all, you know.
Right.
But no,
exactly.
man,
it's funny. This is a comment from 2 years ago, and now when I saw this, I'm like, should I comment? Just because we aren't wearing ethnic wear all the time, we're not Igorot. Anyway.
Yeah.
That's funny how you say it's only 2 years ago, but like that was recent. Like that's because I've had conversations and it's frustrating me how I express how there has been discrimination towards our people, and then younger people now, they're like, what? I don't understand these discriminations. I'm like, oh, there has been, and there are discriminations, like even now, just like in that comment, or not discrimination, but just like ignorances or whatever. And like I've had conversations. My comments have been like questioned if there were any such ignorances, that there clearly are. It's just stupid, man. No offense.
I mean, I think it's hard to blame them. I mean, it's just beliefs that are spread and passed down. Like I don't know. That's why we just need to do our best, like promoting the culture, and
it is our responsibility to share our stuff out there
and who we are, that we're alive. Yeah,
right, and that's our responsibility. You can't expect somebody else to say, because even we're a minority amongst Filipinos, right? Filipino groups, and so and a specific kind of ethnic minority too. So we have to be the one who is vocal to share. They're not going to be the ones. Usually, people, if you're the one who has the power, it's not in your consciousness to even think about that, because that's not in you're not even, generally you're not thinking about that. And so then it's the one who is on the other side, who has the responsibility to share that. It's a responsibility of the one in power to listen, but the one who's on the other side has to be the one who's vocal, who has to share. And I think that's a responsibility there. You can't expect them, hey, they're doing all kinds of, whatever, and I'm just pissed off and not participating. That's not going to work. In fact, out of sight, out of mind. If you're not participating in some way, if you're not building relationship, they won't know. The only way people have known over the years is because of either an interpersonal relationship or the fact that we've gotten our ethnic groups, our organizations out there, and people have witnessed it. Or they intermarry with us, and then all of a sudden, then they know. That's I mean, that's those are
one of the things
ways.
that we did. One of the things that we did earlier, we do this now, but like in our parties, we don't always wear our G-strings or our top-ists, right? When we're performing, when we perform, but like when we're having a party, we just dance and play and and do all that stuff in just whatever clothes you want to wear, right? And there were some in the 90s when I was still in university, we got invited to our youth bebop got invited to a couple functions, and it was really interesting because like I think they were expecting us to wear all our stuff, but we wanted to show them that we are just normal people.
It's a living culture.
You know,
it's a living
culture. A living culture. So we came there. We wore the vest, the chaleco, and then the girls wore tapis over their other clothes and stuff. But we just represented just as like who we are. Just we're in just standard clothing with just the vest and the tapis. But we didn't go in the full regalia because we wanted to show that. You see these Igorot people? They look just like you. And this was during a Filipino gathering. We wanted to show them that they look just like you, and we're playing the gangsa, and we can still play the gangsa. We can still do our things. We can still do our chanting. We can still do it, and we look like you, you know? And I think that was, remember that, I forgot what the name of that place was, but I remember people were really kind of surprised about that. No, it wasn't a Bindle Stiff. No, it was at another place down in San Francisco. And they were really surprised. And people were just like, wow, we didn't even know that there was a real authentic Igorot community here. And we're like, we exist, man. We look just like you. That's the thing.
Surprise!
And
surprise!
Surprise! And it's really interesting because like again, we are a minority amongst Filipinos, and so there is always going to be that notion of like what we are, in their minds. And sometimes you got to take advantage of some moments and represent yourself in a certain way so they can realize who you really are, that you're alive, that culture exists, and stop romanticizing us in such a weird way.
That's true.
Oh,
that's the thing. Like the more we can do to get ourselves out there, the better it is. And I just can't wait for the day that we have a stronger social media presence, to be honest.
It's happening.
I'm
definitely
hoping
happening.
Something like this will start that up or open that up, just because social media right now is such a strong a vessel for content consumption and education. So one of these days, I don't know.
Because what sucks right now is there's other people that are effectively appropriating Igorot stuff, and they're bigger on social media. Ridiculous.
We know who they are.
Are we going there?
Hey.
On that note, hold up. I'm just gonna go to the bathroom. I'm not even in the chat. I'm just gonna go to the bathroom.
So he had to
we'll
open
save
that up,
that part.
Right?
I like how he just brings it up and leaves.
Yeah.
No, that's the funny thing. There are other groups that they're just straight up appropriating Igorot culture, but I'm curious because we obviously know of at least one. I'm wondering if there are more. Either if they're doing it subconsciously or just blatantly.
To get one on our show here, let's, be kind of fun.
Well, we should. What we should do next time is actually possibly look at some videos, and and do just do a little bit of commentary as we watch it. We could do something like that. So that's possible, right?
Yeah. So to give you guys context, our plan for the next one is to watch a video that I've shared to some people already, and it's I don't even know what to say, but just to watch a video and provide our insight on what's happening in the video. We'll see if we can get that together whenever we do this again, next week or the week after. But it should be a good one because I wouldn't miss that one.
Be like a reaction
fun,
video,
and I think but it is part of the dialogue, and if there's no opportunity for dialogue, there's no growth. So I think that, hey, let's take it on, and let's see what it is. I actually haven't seen the video. Kind of like excited to kind of like
Ye-
see how it turns out.
Yeah, so I think Jay is the only one that hasn't seen it before. But I
Adult too, right?
no, I think I've shown him. But either way, I haven't watched it myself in a long time, and
Yeah.
yeah, it's very interesting. It's a interesting
Right.
video. Yeah,
If
but
anybody who's watching doesn't have context about what we're talking about, because we may have skipped some, we may have made some assumptions that some people from our community know. Like what is IIC and that kind of stuff. Please feel free to ask, and we'll definitely answer it for the next show.
right, exactly. Like any
Yeah.
questions about what we're talking about, any comments, anything really that you want to add to the conversation, because this is what this is it's kind of a conversation, hopefully, just to get people thinking about things. We may not agree, or we may not fall in line with whatever you're thinking, and that's fine. Bring that up, and we're totally okay to talk about that. Just what happens on many of the things that we're talking about, we follow kind of the same thought, us four at least. So that's why,
In general, right?
yeah, on some of these topics, I try to be the devil's advocate, but I know there are other opinions out there, and those are definitely valuable because, yeah, we like different sides of the story. So, since you're back, Edel, what were you saying? I forgot.
Oh, I thought you carried on. What
We
was
did,
I
but
saying? What was I saying?
We did, but we got sidetracked. What were you saying?
What was it?
Oh,
What was it?
Oh, dude.
Oh, like with social media. Like I've come across people on social media that basically take even the name Igorot as their handle, and yet they're not Igorot. Um, I've come to just conclude that like that's it is what it is what it is. At first, it was really like I was like, what, that's crazy, that's insane. But I think my frustration more so lies on the fact that I myself, I'm not as big. You know what I mean? Like I don't have as big as a following as him. Or
You mean in terms of like your ability to, or in terms of like your sharing ability? You know what I mean?
yeah. I just have I don't have as much followers as him. At the end of the day, yeah, because like
Well,
if
that's the thing about all this. Like we all talk about being frustrated about these things and that, but then in the end, a lot of us are, we just learn to let it go because it's tiring just being frustrated all the time. Like
exactly.
and it doesn't
Right.
it's not what do you call it, that productive, really, just being frustrated. So I think that's for me, that was a big thing. It's just like, why am I getting frustrated or angry about these things? It's just the nurse in me wanted to self-reflect and really delve into that. And yeah, I think it's because partly because I would like to know more about my culture so that I could actually educate these people, but as well as I don't know, maybe there's a little bit of envy there, just like Edel.
yeah,
I
for
don't
me
know.
that's all it
But
basically boils down to.
yeah, and I think it helps just turning that energy into something more productive, or channeling it into something more productive in terms of our culture. So I've learned to live with it, and hopefully I can get something going.
This is part of the process, man. This is part of the process, guys. I think that over the years, I've had my share of being frustrated and angry as well, and I still do get frustrated and angry about certain things. But like, one of the things we can say is that and I think Jay can agree with me, is that like over time you learn that it's just part of the process of just trying to, where it comes to like self-reflection, and you start to see you start to ask yourself the right questions, like, why was I angry at that? What was it?
Mhm.
Well, basically, so you can self-reflect, because self-reflections, it's huge. It's huge,
Mm-hmm.
and that's the only way you're gonna grow, I think. And
Correct.
that's part of, I think,
Correct.
just our path to kind of learning more about who we are.
Absolutely.
Mm.
Jay, I know you're probably gonna comment on something about this, since self-reflection is big in your your arena.
I'm really curious to see how people come to, you know, creating their own Igorot identity outside of like outside outside of outside of having it in your bloodline. And so, I mean, what does that mean for us if people want to claim that they're Igorot too? I mean, in some ways, it's kind of flattering. It's like, ooh, wow,
Mm-hmm.
dude wants to be like us. I'm just really kind of curious. What's the mythology? What's the thing behind it? What supernatural thing does that give a person? And I think that a lot has to do with how we understand who we are in this
Right.
world. And so I I, I'm curious to see how the video works, and also curious to see how how it uh, how people have gotten to that conclusion. That was my daughter's hand, by the way. She's turning that uh that wind guard into a
A
clown
nose,
nose
a
now.
red. A clown nose.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, no, it's
yeah.
true.
Well,
I'm pretty excited about our next video here. Hopefully, we can get that together.
Yes.
Sorry, Mark. What?
that'd be really interesting. What was I going about? Oh yeah, yeah. Well, I just think that, like, in general, and I know you talk about this a lot of times during your sermons and stuff, but like, everybody's always looking for that sense of wholeness. I think it's just a natural thing, whether they know it or not. They're looking for some sense of wholeness, and I think for
Mhm.
the larger Filipino community, who aren't Igorot, I think they're looking for a sense of roots, you know. And sometimes they look to us because, hey, those are the Igorot people. They have the indigenous blood,
Right,
and yet at the same,
right.
yeah. So they want to connect with that because they want that inside. They want that sense of root, you know.
And
So,
and and
and
I
I
think
think
it
that it's important.
didn't. It reminds me of like even though people will identify as being Filipino, sometimes there are people there who don't. It's hard to trace what that means. Yeah, you kind of
Yeah.
know where your family might be from, but there's so many nuances that are lost. Yeah, we eat certain foods that are in common with each other. Yeah, I love and bangos and all of that. Uh, but I think that very much so people are struggling to figure out who they are and try to be whole people in all of
Mm-hmm.
this. And that that's
And
that's a journey that we all take.
I mean, look all the Filipinos who want to do Hawaiian dancing, native Hawaiian dancing.
Right,
There's so
that's
many
true. That's
Filipinos who
true.
want to connect to
Erica.
like Polynesian culture,
Wow.
because it's is that what they do in America? Yes, that's what they do.
Shut
They do in
up.
America.
Yes, that's
Joking.
what we do in America. Yes, yes.
But
We
a
do
lot of
love Hawaiian
Filipinos,
dances.
second
They're
generation
they're good
Filipinos,
at
and
it at
maybe
least.
third. Yeah, well, they want to connect to something that feels like islander to them. You know, they
Right,
wanna feel
right.
that sense of rootedness
Yeah.
somehow, and distantly. There's no doubt about it that Native Hawaiians and Filipinos in general are kind of related, are related in
Absolutely.
genetically. But it's just in general. I think people are searching for that sense
Yeah, I've
of
had
like
I've
rootedness.
had friends comment, and I've had conversations, or they've made comments where like, oh yeah, Filipinos have no culture, like, you know what I'm saying, like, and I'm
Yeah, they
just
only do
standing,
hip hop.
or they incorporate like Western or American culture, and like if
Yeah,
you look at the Philippines now, what's popular in the Philippines is to be more American or whatever, right? That's usually
well,
That's
yeah,
that's
the
definitely a
common
thing
comment.
because you
Exactly.
see that. I mean, it's present. It's right there,
Exactly. The more
especially in the
Western you
lowlands.
try to be. Exactly, exactly. In Manila, in the media, the Filipino media, and I've always had friends that say like, yeah, man, it sucks that Filipinos have no culture. There's like no culture in the Philippines, because it's been lost and whatnot. But that's the lowlands, like, and I'm sitting there. I've never said anything because before I just never had an opinion, and um, thinking back about it now, like that's so I can't identify with that because that's
Um,
certainly not true for us,
Yeah.
I mean,
right?
I don't think it's just the
Well,
lowlands though, because when you talk to people, even in the Cordilleras, like a lot of
Mm,
times in the Philippines, I mean, this is just from personal experience, what people have told me. A lot of
yeah,
people there aren't even really seeking to learn about our culture,
that's
the
a good
way
point.
we
Yeah.
are.
That's a good
That
point.
might be changing now, but that was definitely a thing.
oh,
So, yeah,
It,
I don't know.
yeah, it's definitely changed a lot in the late '90s, since after that first
yeah.
IIC, where they really started implementing like cultural education in the schools, which was huge. And like I said before, a lot of the young folks even over there didn't even know there was any difference from before and now.
Mm,
But in
But
the
like
No,
all the young
they
schools,
folks now, they learn
because
it.
it's
Yeah,
been
they
over a
learn the
generation
dances in the
already.
schools.
in the
Yeah,
schools,
Hmm.
as
we're
in any or just
in up
university.
north in Cordillera, in the
um,
universities and also
and
in the
elementary
schools.
schools too.
Other schools.
Elementary schools, because I
Yeah,
remember when I
they're
was in
learning it
school
from a
back.
young age.
Yeah, when I was in school back in the Philippines, between kindergarten or K1 or whatever to
Mm,
grade 2, I believe, we never did anything Igorot related. Our biggest
mm.
class was like religion, right? Like the
Right, right.
Mm.
staple of colonialism right there. But yeah, so but now I'm seeing like it's so big in like in northern media, like where
Yeah,
they're just showing, oh yeah, and even in elementary schools they're teaching how to do this and that. That's a big thing
right.
now for the education there up in the north.
Which is, I think that's changed the game, man, in terms of like
Mm.
making sure that there's cultural preservation. I mean, that's the one thing I think that our people can be proud of, is that they did change that. So, and then also like we can talk about how our parents also set up organizations from abroad to kind of to also maintain that sense of identity and awareness.
Yeah, yeah.
I think
I
that's
don't think
pretty
they
cool. Definitely
realized
something to be proud of.
the integration of cultural learning came from IAC.
It was
I
definitely
never
it
knew
was
that either.
heavily
I,
influenced by it, because
I
they
think
saw
that
that.
definitely was a stream of consciousness that happened around that time. That was, I mean, and it really kind of like hit that tipping point. But definitely that conversation that happened because that first IAC brought in leadership from all Igorot
Over the
world.
world, yeah.
Yeah, from
And
all
so
over
one
the
of the
world. It
leaders,
brought in the leaders.
yeah, one of the
huh.
leaders in education, the Cordillera, after that IIC said, "We're going to bring this back. We're going to make sure," because what they were most surprised at were that the young people in America were dancing, especially that bebop of Los Angeles. I'll give you guys props again. Those kids, the youth over there, man, they were all involved, and that
Those
was
youth who
definitely
are
sense of
our
pride.
age. Those people
Yeah.
are our age.
Oh shit,
So,
they're not youth
but we
anymore.
were the
Sorry,
youth
guys.
of that time.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
think about it.
Yes.
That group, that second generation, mostly second generation group that learned from
It
their
was
elders.
mixed generation. Yeah.
Yeah, but would learn from their elders and then embellish that sense of that sense of pride and knowing that we have a gift to share out to the world. That was what one of Rex Botengen's kind of like visions were, and so did Donald Bwangan would say something very similar. Um, as leaders, they were always preaching about the fact that we have something, a great gift to share out to the world, and if we don't share it, then it's lost. And so, and that's our responsibility to go and share that out there. And that's part of the vision of those the BBAC groups and the IIC was to go and send that out. And
Yeah.
so it really, when people in the Philippines started saying, "Oh man, these guys are like quite proud of who they are here in a foreign land. It really, whether it be something that there was a call to action or a feeling of like a little bit of shame for not knowing, it turned into something that was they needed to share with with the
Just
younger generations.
inspiration in general. Yeah,
Well,
definitely
yeah, yeah,
inspiration. I
yeah.
think because
Mhm.
they saw a model that worked. It's like, oh shoot,
Right.
we can teach this stuff, you know?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And then people within the community started teaching those things again, um, those
Mm.
elements. And so that's just some of the very basic stuff. I think that culturally goes a little bit deeper. So because what you hear now are people who feel a deep sense of like a pride of who they are, where they come from, and even if they don't articulate it that much, they feel a great affinity to their Igorotness now.
Nice, I like that. So we literally hit 2 hours,
Oh, yay!
Whoa.
and
Are you serious?
That's
That's why I needed
crazy,
to
man. Like,
pee.
I don't want to keep Mark up for
Holy-
too much longer, and I just see a message here that
oh man, it's almost 2. Oh.
that people aren't even hearing me on the stream. This is the audio issues I was talking about. So.
Oh, what the?
What? How are they not hearing you? We can hear you though.
I know.
Yeah, it might be the.
Just probably because of Discord, but anyway, I'm pretty sure I know why. So just to not sum this up, but just to end this, I think we're just gonna go back to country songs. I'll ask you guys what your favorite country song is.
Oof.
Oh man,
Mark?
I'll have
man.
to look for that.
Actually, you know what? I'll go first
Yeah.
because my knowledge is not as extensive as I think you guys. But
You're gonna pick the easiest one, right?
Exactly. I'm loving. I mean, Kenny Rogers, the Gambler.
Oh, you took mine.
Oh no! Oh,
Exactly. And it's funny because it pertains to these frustrations and things and dealing with appropriation, and then how people are viewing I guess our culture as just the lyrics going, you gotta know when to hold them, you gotta know when to fold them,
Yeah.
you gotta know, or you know when to walk away and when to run. So those,
Right.
especially those lyrics, I mean, they just work for everything.
wow!
So amazing.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, sorry, Mark.
Yeah.
That's okay. I'll think of another one. Go, Jay.
Maybe Jay.
Oh well,
Where's
I'll
Edel?
take the
I'll
take the
find it.
really easy one. Country roads,
Of course.
take me home to the place
To the place.
I belong. West Virginia, Mountain Mama, take me home, my country road.
Country roads.
Classic.
Yeah. I don't know if that came out well on the
That was pretty good.
The
It sounded good.
Discord. Oh wow!
There.
Wow.
Okay. I have a lot of different. Since you guys picked some of the old school ones, I'm gonna pick a semi-modern one. And of course, it might sound corny to people, but Jesus Take the Wheel. I really like that song. That's by
Oh,
Carrie
wow.
Underwood. Yeah,
No,
because
that's fair.
yeah, well, she's an awesome writer, and that one's just basically about letting go and just giving yourself up to giving your problems up to
Mhm, mhm.
just let go. Don't be so controlling over the issues and just let the spirit take you.
Let
So
go.
I
and
really-
let God.
Mm.
Yes, because I got to do that all the time. Like there's some things, there's situations I want to control, and then really, reality is like, no, just go with the flow. Just go with the flow.
Oh wow!
Uh,
Wow.
But there's a lot of good ones, man. Just like I like a lot of Johnny Cash.
Yeah,
stuff too,
you know who
so,
I like a lot is Darius Rucker. You know Hootie?
Darius
Oh?
Rucker. Oh yeah. He's a more modern
Yeah,
guy.
yeah, yeah. He
Mhm.
has a lot of great country songs, and um, I think that he speaks a lot to kind of like he has this one song like "Learn to Live" that speaks of like you know taking the experience of life and making it meaningful, or
Yeah.
this appreciating where you are now because there was a great journey to get you to where you needed to go. So I mean those are very country songs.
The one
You know
black
some
guy.
Yeah.
the one black guy. Hey, you know who
It
really
works.
loved country music was the blind what's his name
Ray
uh
Charles.
Ray Charles. Yeah, he loved country music and same
Mm.
with Lionel Richie.
Black
Easy,
black
man.
music
Easy was a
invented
country
country
song.
music, man.
Hey, there you go. You know,
Yeah. They invented it.
All right, Edel,
rhythm
what's
and
your
blues.
pick?
Yeah, I'm gonna go for a cheap one. A modern one would be Tennessee whiskey, the Chris
Oh yeah.
Chris Stapleton rendition. Obviously, like
Oh,
Oh
it's
yeah.
like a modern classic now. But I think my favorite, like something that really speaks to me the most, would be "Go Rest High on That
Oh
Mountain"
my
by
God. Yeah.
Vince Gill.
I
Man,
love that
Oh wow,
song.
mm,
wow.
We sung that during my wife's uncle's funeral.
mm,
Man, that one really,
mm.
you know,
Ooh,
hit.
wow,
If you don't know
wow,
it, you should
Yeah,
wow.
check it out. There's a good one, the Vince Gill song.
yeah. I
Go
started getting into country recently because I started working in construction, even though I'm not in the field, but like construction, like in construction, you're either listening to like heavy metal or country music. I started getting into it, but even my brother who's like not into country, he's like, one of the things he said was like country music can either be like super soulful and like yeah, like what you said too, like super honest, or just completely terrible, like a lot of the
Can be.
modern stuff, right? But yeah.
You know, like I did want to mention like Marty Robbins. I don't know if you guys know him. If you want to listen to like old school cowboy music, this guy talks like stories about like having his 6-gun shooter and stuff and trying to fight for the fair maiden. You know what I mean? Like
Oh
that's
right.
old school stuff. My dad used to listen to that all the time, and God, it's in my head like repeatedly because we sometimes he would never change that tape, and then he had a CD player. He never changed that CD. So every time you get in the car, it's like Marty Robbins all the time. It was, but,
Wow,
but
I
it's
remember
cool.
those Marty Robbins songs.
Yeah, man.
He had that
Marty
song El
Robbins.
Paso, right?
El
I think that's
Paso,
what you're
yeah.
talking about.
El
Yeah.
Paso.
Well, a
Yeah.
lot of the songs are like, yeah. It goes again.
Out in the West Texas
nice.
town of El Paso, I fell in love with a Mexican girl. That one?
Yes, that one. All the time.
Oh
Classic.
man.
Classic.
All
You guys
right.
pick some
Nighttime
good
would find me in Rose's cantina. Music would play. Oh, I forgot how that rest goes.
Felina was mine. I think it was Felina,
Oh,
right?
right. Felina.
was mine.
Felina.
Well,
Felina.
What's a classic
Felina,
one? I don't know if
Felina.
you guys still sing this, but like this is more like folk music than country music. But in our beatbox, they would always sing. What's the one, Jay? The one that Uncle Rex used to sing all the time at the end of things.
Oh,
That folk song,
that
man.
thing about be back home
Oh,
again.
It's Be Back Home Again. That's yeah.
What the heck?
Yeah.
Be back home again. No, the other one, the one that Uncle Rex would always sing at the end of things.
The
would be
more
like,
we get together, together, the more
you guys
we
do
get
that at all?
together,
Seriously?
the happier
Did the old folks
are
do
we.
that?
That's hilarious.
Yeah, that's definitely Uncle
always
Rex there. Oh, man.
Really?
They do that
Yeah,
here
that's
too.
why I sang that at that last
Really?
IAC. Well, the Hawaii IAC, because that was definitely that's definitely Uncle Rex's song, man.
Yeah, but a lot of the older beatbox would do that. At least the ones in America that I know of.
Yeah,
they
yeah,
love
that's
to sing
true.
that. The old
That's true.
folks love to sing that
tradition.
song. You know, a lot of old folk songs, right?
Mhm.
So it's not just. Well, I guess folk songs would. It's like mixing genres. They're kind of this. they're together, but they can be apart. You know, like Paul Simon's stuff can be not necessarily like a country, but he still does storytelling. It's more like folk and stuff, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyways.
Nice. So before we end this, I do. Well, I think I'm going to get maybe Edel to echo this because they can't hear me. Yeah, check out our Igorot World Twitter. I just opened one. It'll look nicer a little bit later on, but I did start one just for updates and for, I don't know, whatever we want to post on there. Just maybe another place of gathering information or, you know, tweeting links or whatever. So follow that and check out, if you don't want to watch the full podcast or whichever, like I will be breaking them up into clips like I did with the last one, just so that it's a little bit more, it's a little bit easier to digest than a 2+ hours a podcast.
Yeah.
So I will be breaking that up. The other ones are already from the last stream, that is already broken up, but hopefully we can put some tags in the first video as well. So
great.
Can you just echo that, Edel?
All right, folks, kids that can't hear Gerald, Igorot World Twitter at Igorot World is live and has been since last week. That's Igorot World at Igorot World. Sorry, and then if you don't want to watch the full 2 hours of this, Gerald has been cutting them up into small batches. So go to the Igorot World YouTube page and you'll see a lot of very, very relevant topics. And basically, Gerald's just cutting them up into like bite-sized, consumable 10-minute
chunks.
Yeah, chunks, effectively, yeah. A lot of them really good because it's the stuff we're talking about, except bite-sized for you people with low
although my cousin
like me.
my cousin just plays it in the background. My cousin Ryan,
he
was listening
podcasts.
to last week's. Yeah, he just put it on, just played it in the background. So,
but
he thought it was.
It's also really good that Gerald's been cutting them up into like bite-sized pieces, so it's easier to share.
Yeah,
because a lot of
that's
like,
true.
Our
especially for
really
specific items. Yeah,
exactly. That's really good.
That was the purpose of that.
Share.
Instead of sharing a 2-hour thing.
Yeah. Relevant.
Yeah, shorter is better for sharing, definitely.
All right.
Yeah.
Jay, you still there?
Sleeping.
Is there a robot over there?
You still there, man? You're like frozen, bro.
I think so.
I'm still here.
Okay.
Man.
Yeah, I think my my computer's overheating.
It's telling us we need to stop. All right. Thanks everybody for joining us again, and we'll see you in the next one. Hopefully, like we said, it's going to be that reaction video or something. I'm really looking forward to it. So we'll see you then, maybe next week or the week after. I'm not really sure, but if you follow our Twitter, we will update it there. Great. Thank you. See you guys.
Right on, folks. See ya.
Bye-bye.